君は五条悟だから最強なのか、最強だから五条悟なのか。
This question, asked by Suguru Geto to Gojo Satoru in the final moments of their friendship, cuts to the heart of one of philosophy's oldest debates. Are we defined by our power, or does our power come from who we are? It's the question of identity versus ability, nature versus achievement, the self that exists beneath what we can do, if such a self even exists at all. For most people, this is an abstract philosophical puzzle. But for Gojo Satoru, it's the existential crisis that has defined his entire life. Because Gojo isn't just powerful. He's not just talented or gifted or exceptional. He is literally untouchable, literally infinite, literally beyond human limitation. Born with the Six Eyes and the Limitless technique, abilities that hadn't appeared together in 400 years, Gojo Satoru entered the world as a living shift in the balance of power. Curses grew stronger the moment he was born, simply to compensate for his existence. He is, without question or competition, the strongest. But here's the tragedy that Geto's question exposes. Being the strongest is also the loneliest thing in the world. This is the philosophy of Gojo Satoru from Jujutsu Kaisen, a story about what happens when you're born at the peak, when there's no one who can understand you, when your very existence creates an infinite distance between yourself and everyone else, and how one man chose to use that terrible, isolating power, not to dominate but to nurture, not to rule but to teach, not because he had to, but because without it, he would be completely, devastatingly alone. To understand Gojo Satoru, you first have to understand what it means to be born with everything. Gojo was born into the Gojo clan, one of the three great families of Jujutsu society. But even among this elite bloodline, his birth was extraordinary. He was born with the Six Eyes, a rare ocular ability that allows him to see and manipulate cursed energy with perfect precision, burning through infinite calculations instantly while consuming virtually no energy himself. And he was born with Limitless, a technique that manipulates space at the atomic level, creating literal infinity between himself and anything that approaches him. Together, these abilities make him functionally invincible. Nothing can touch him. Nothing can hurt him. Nothing can even reach him unless he allows it. But here's what the story reveals. Gojo's family didn't raise him as a son. They raised him as a weapon. From birth, he was separated from his parents, trained intensively, viewed not as a person but as a tool for the clan's power. He was the Six Eyes and Limitless user, the first in centuries. And that's all that mattered. The person inside the power was irrelevant. When we first meet young Gojo in the Hidden Inventory arc, he's insufferable, cocky, arrogant, dismissive. He makes jokes at inappropriate times, treats missions casually, and genuinely believes nothing and no one can challenge him, and why wouldn't he? He's never been hurt. He's never been afraid. He's never felt helpless. If you've never experienced pain, how do you empathize with those who live in fear? If you've never failed, how do you understand struggle? If you've always been the strongest, how do you relate to weakness? You don't. And so young Gojo floats above humanity, literally and figuratively, existing in a realm of power so vast that normal human concerns feel trivial to him. But there's one person who can reach him. One person who exists in a space adjacent to his own impossible level of strength. Suguru Geto. Geto was also a special grade sorcerer, one of the elite few, who operate outside the normal ranking system. Like Gojo, he was powerful beyond measure. Like Gojo, he was burdened with extraordinary responsibility from a young age. But unlike Gojo, Geto was kind, empathetic, principled. Where Gojo was reckless, Geto was thoughtful. Where Gojo treated people casually, Geto genuinely cared about protecting the weak. Where Gojo's power created distance, Geto used his strength to bridge gaps. They were opposites in personality but equals in strength. And that equality meant something profound. For the first time in his life, Gojo had someone who could stand beside him. Someone who understood what it meant to be this strong. Someone who saw him not as a weapon or a tool, but as a person. Geto was Gojo's best friend, his partner, his equal. And for a brief, shining moment in their youth, Gojo wasn't alone. In 2006, Gojo and Geto were assigned a critical mission: protect Riko Amenai, the star plasma vessel, and escort her to merge with Master Tengen. Tengen is an immortal sorcerer whose barriers protect all of Japan from cursed spirits, but his technique requires him to assimilate with a compatible human every 500 years, or he'll evolve beyond control. Riko Amenai was that compatible vessel. She would cease to exist as an individual, absorbed into Tengen's being. It was supposed to be a routine mission for the two strongest, but Riko wasn't just a vessel to them. She was a girl, a teenager with dreams and fears, someone who wanted to live, who had a guardian who loved her, who was being forced to sacrifice her entire existence for a world that saw her as nothing more than a tool. And Gojo and Geto, despite their power, couldn't save her from that fate. The mission went catastrophically wrong. A man named Toji Fushiguro, a sorcerer killer with no cursed energy but inhuman physical abilities, was hired to assassinate Riko. Toji ambushed Gojo first, and in a moment that shocked everyone, Toji nearly killed him. For the first time in his life, Gojo felt genuine fear, genuine pain, genuine helplessness. Toji left him bleeding out, then moved on to complete his contract, and he killed Riko, shot her, dead, in front of Geto, the girl they were supposed to protect, the girl who had just chosen to embrace life over duty, who had decided she didn't want to merge with Tengen after all, died before Geto could save her. Geto failed to protect her, and he believed Gojo was dead too. For Geto, this was the beginning of his downfall. He had done everything right. He had fought with honor. He had genuinely tried to protect the innocent, and it didn't matter. Riko was dead. The world didn't care. But for Gojo, this was his awakening. Bleeding out, on the edge of death, something inside Gojo clicked. He unlocked reverse curse technique, the ability to heal himself by reversing the destructive flow of cursed energy, and in that moment of near-death clarity, he understood his powers completely. He mastered infinity. He perfected his techniques. He tapped into abilities he'd never fully grasped before. And when Toji came back to finish the job, Gojo annihilated him. This is when he speaks the line that would define him. Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one. It sounds like pure arrogance, like the declaration of a god. But it's not triumph, it's a realization. Gojo has just understood fully and completely that he exists on a level no one else can reach, that he is functionally beyond human, that he is, truly and irrevocably, alone at the peak of power. He is the honored one, and that honor is a curse. After the mission, things were never the same between Gojo and Geto. Geto had watched Riko die. He'd failed to protect her. And then he saw crowds of non-sorcerers, people from the Star religious group, celebrating her death, cheering that the Star plasma vessel had been killed before she could merge with Tengen. The people they were risking their lives to protect were celebrating the murder of a child. For Geto, this planted a seed of doubt. Are non-sorcerers even worth protecting? Meanwhile, Gojo had achieved perfect mastery of his power. He was now truly, undeniably the strongest. He no longer needed Geto as a partner. He could handle anything alone. And so they drifted apart. Gojo became stronger, more isolated. The infinite distance created by his limitless technique became a metaphor for his life. Nothing and no one could reach him anymore. And Geto spiraled. There's a concept in psychology called the burden of giftedness. It describes the isolation that comes from operating at a level so far beyond others that normal human connection becomes difficult or impossible. Gojo Satoru embodies this perfectly. When you're invincible, you can't bond over shared vulnerability. When you're infallible, you can't relate to failure. When you're the strongest, there's no one who truly understands the weight you carry. And so you're alone. Even in crowds, even surrounded by students and colleagues, you are fundamentally, profoundly alone. This is what Geto's question exposes. Is Gojo strong because of who he is? Or is who he is entirely defined by his strength? The terrifying answer is, Gojo doesn't know. He's never had the chance to be anything else. He's never existed without his power. His identity and his abilities are so intertwined that separating them is impossible. If you took away his strength, would there even be a Gojo Satoru underneath? Here's the cruel irony of Gojo's technique. His limitless ability creates literal infinity between himself and anything approaching him. It's why nothing can touch him. It's why he's invincible. But that infinity isn't just physical, it's emotional, social, existential. Gojo exists in a space that no one else can occupy. His power, the very thing that makes him the strongest, is also the thing that ensures he can never truly connect with anyone. He is protected by infinity and imprisoned by it. This is what the series keeps returning to. Absolute strength creates absolute loneliness. When you're too strong to be challenged, too powerful to need help, too gifted to struggle, you lose the ability to form relationships based on mutual need, shared hardship, or genuine vulnerability. You become untouchable in every sense of the word. Philosophers have long debated the nature of identity. What makes you you? Is it your abilities, your achievements, your power? Or is it something deeper, your values, your choices, your relationships? For Gojo, this isn't academic, it's existential. He was born with abilities that define him completely. His clan saw him as the Six Eyes and Limitless user first, person second. His society sees him as the strongest before they see him as Satoru. Even his own sense of self is constructed around his power. When Geto asks, "Are you the strongest because you're Gojo Satoru, or are you Gojo Satoru because you're the strongest?" He's asking a question Gojo can't answer, because Gojo has never existed apart from his strength. He doesn't know who he would be without it, and that's terrifying. A year after Riko's death, Geto's worldview completely collapsed. He was sent on a mission to a remote village where two young sorcerer girls, Mimiko and Nanako, were being tortured by non-sorcerers who blamed them for local curse activity. Geto rescued the girls, and then he slaughtered the entire village. He had reached his conclusion. Non-sorcerers are the problem. They create curses through their negative emotions, but they lack the strength to deal with them. They're weak, ignorant, and ungrateful. The only way to eliminate curses is to eliminate non-sorcerers. Geto defected from Jujutsu Society and became a curse user, a terrorist who believed sorcerers should rule over or exterminate regular humans. And when Gojo was ordered to execute him, Gojo couldn't do it. Despite everything, despite Geto's crimes, despite his betrayal of their shared values, Gojo still saw him as his best friend, the only equal he'd ever had. So Gojo let him go. Geto's fall crushed Gojo in ways that nothing else had. He'd survived Toji. He'd mastered his abilities. He'd become the strongest, but he couldn't save the one person who truly mattered to him. All his power, all his strength, all his invincibility. It meant nothing when his best friend needed him most. And this is where Gojo's philosophy crystallized. Strength alone isn't enough. Being the strongest didn't prevent Riko's death. It didn't save Geto from despair. It didn't protect the people he cared about. All it did was ensure he'd carry the burden of that failure completely alone. After Geto left, Gojo made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He decided to reform Jujutsu Society from the inside. Not through force or domination, though he certainly had the power for that, but through education. He became a teacher at Tokyo Jujutsu High, and his goal wasn't just to train strong sorcerers, it was to raise a generation that wouldn't repeat the mistakes that broke Geto. He wanted to nurture sorcerers who could think for themselves, who wouldn't blindly follow the corrupt higher-ups, who could forge a new path. But more than that, and here's the heartbreaking truth, Gojo secretly hoped that one of his students would surpass him. Because if someone could surpass him, that would mean he's no longer alone at the top. That would mean he's finally not the strongest anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that would mean he could stop being so lonely. Most people with Gojo's abilities would use them to rule, to control, to reshape the world through force. Gojo does use his power to challenge the system. He regularly threatens and intimidates the Jujutsu higher-ups, protecting students like Yuji Itadori and Yuta Okatsu, who would otherwise be executed. But his real power is more subtle. He invests in people. He sees potential where others see problems. He protects the defective students that the old guard wants eliminated. He gives chances to those who don't fit the traditional mold. Why? Because he knows that the strongest alone cannot change the world. He learned that with Geto, no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't save his friend through strength alone. But a generation of strong, independent sorcerers who share his values, that could change everything. Yuji Itadori, vessel of Sukuna, sentenced to death by the higher-ups, survives because Gojo protects him. Yuta Okatsu, cursed by tremendous power he couldn't control, also sentenced to death, becomes one of the strongest sorcerers because Gojo saw potential instead of danger. Megumi Fushiguro, son of Toji, the man who nearly killed Gojo, is personally mentored by Gojo because Gojo sees in him the possibility of greatness. Gojo doesn't just teach technique, he teaches his students to question authority, to protect what matters, to think for themselves. And crucially, he shows them they're not alone. Because Gojo knows, more intimately than anyone, what loneliness does to powerful people. He saw it destroy Geto. He feels it himself every day. So he refuses to let his students suffer the same isolation. Gojo wears a blindfold, ostensibly to control the overwhelming input from his 6 eyes. But it's also symbolic. He hides his eyes because he doesn't want others to see his loneliness, his doubt, his fear that despite everything, he's still just a weapon. When he's with his students, he's playful, irreverent. He makes jokes and acts like nothing bothers him, but it's a mask. Beneath it is someone who carries the weight of being the strongest, knowing the title is both his power and his prison. His greatest hope, the thing that keeps him going, is that one day, his students will surpass him. Not because he wants to be defeated, but because being surpassed would mean he's finally free from the curse of being alone at the top. So let's return to the question that started this. Are you the strongest because you're Gojo Satoru, or are you Gojo Satoru because you're the strongest? The story's answer is complex, but ultimately this, both, and that's the tragedy. Gojo was born with abilities that destined him for this role. The 6 Eyes and Limitless chose him, he didn't choose them, but he also became Gojo Satoru through his choices, his decision to become a teacher, his protection of defective students, his rebellion against corrupt authority, his refusal to kill Geto despite orders. His strength is innate, but who he is, how he uses that strength, is his choice, and that's what separates him from being merely the strongest. That's what makes him Satoru. Being the strongest is a burden Gojo carries every moment of his life. It means ultimate responsibility. It means loneliness. It means everyone depends on you, but no one truly understands you. It means that when you fail, like he failed Geto, like he failed Riko, you carry that weight alone because no one else is strong enough to share it. But it's also a gift, because that strength allows him to protect, to nurture, to give chances to those who would otherwise have none. His power creates distance, but his choice to teach creates connection. He can't stop being the strongest, but he can choose what that means. The deeper message of Gojo's story is this: power without purpose is just isolation. If Gojo had used his strength only for himself, to dominate, to control, to rule, he would have ended up completely alone, drowning in his own invincibility. Instead, he channels his power towards something meaningful, creating a generation that can stand beside him, not beneath him. This is wisdom that only comes from suffering, from loneliness, from losing the one person who understood you. Gojo learned that being the strongest doesn't matter if you're the only one, so he uses his strength to lift others up, to protect those who can't protect themselves, to change a broken system not through domination, but through patient, persistent education. He's still lonely, but he's no longer purposeless. When Gojo eventually dies, and the story makes clear he won't be remembered just for being the strongest. He'll be remembered for the generation he raised, for the students he protected, for the system he challenged. His legacy won't be his power. It will be the people who carry forward his values. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will surpass him, will reach that impossible peak he's occupied alone for so long. And when that happens, Gojo will finally have what he's always wanted, an equal, someone who understands, someone to stand beside, not because he had to be the strongest, but because he chose to use that strength to ensure he wouldn't be the only one. Are you the strongest because you're Gojo Satoru, or are you Gojo Satoru because you're the strongest? Geto asked this question knowing there was no good answer, knowing it would haunt Gojo for the rest of his life. Because the truth is, Gojo can't separate his identity from his power. They're too intertwined. He is what he is. What the story shows us is that how you carry that burden matters. Gojo could have become a tyrant, a recluse, a tragic figure consumed by his own invincibility. Instead, he became a teacher, a protector, a rebel against an unjust system. He chose to use the curse of infinite strength to give others a chance at avoiding the loneliness it brings. And that choice, not his power, not his technique, not his status as the strongest, is what makes him Satoru. The loneliness never truly ends for him. The infinite distance between himself and others remains. But he's found purpose in that space, found meaning in his isolation, found a way to turn the curse of being the strongest into a gift for those who come after him. And maybe that's the only answer to Geto's question that matters. You can't choose the power you're born with, but you can choose what you do with it. Gojo Satoru chose to teach, to protect, to nurture. And in doing so, he became more than just the strongest. He became someone who matters. That's the philosophy of Gojo Satoru. The strongest sorcerer who learned that power without connection is just a beautiful, lonely prison. If you've ever felt isolated by your own abilities, or struggled with how to use your gifts meaningfully, or wondered what happens when you reach the top and find nobody there, Gojo's story is for you, because it teaches us that being the best at something isn't the goal. Using what you have to lift others up, that's what gives life meaning. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. How do you find purpose in your strengths? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the more anime philosophy that explores the hard questions. Until next time, you don't have to be the strongest to matter. You just have to choose to use whatever strength you have wisely.